"Don't touch it," I said. Not screamed, not whispered, just stated, cold, flat. He froze, thumb hovering over the velvet box. "What? It's just a watch." No, it wasn't. It was a warning in disguise, a fuse tucked into leather. And I knew, without question, that if he touched it, everything we'd built would go up in smoke. But my parents, they had no idea what I'd do next, or how far I'd go. "Hi, I'm Emma Carter, 36, living in Seattle with my husband, David. We run a non-profit that serves hot meals to the unhoused community. It's not glamorous work, but it's honest, and it matters. I'm not the kind of person who makes scenes. I don't do drama. I solve problems. Quietly. But when that box arrived, when I saw the price tag, when I traced where the money came from, everything changed. Because I realized something horrifying. My own family had just tried to bribe my husband to protect a lie that made people sick. Before I tell you how I brought it all down, how I exposed them and nearly destroyed myself in the process, make sure to hit the like button. Comment below if you've ever had to choose between family and what's right. And subscribe. Because this story, it's not what you think. Let's go back to where it all started. It arrived on a Wednesday. Ordinary cardboard, brown tape, a cheerful birthday sticker slapped on top. David had just finished rinsing the dinner plates. I was wiping down the counter. Beige, forgettable food, probably frozen pizza again. That kind of dinner. When the doorbell rang, I figured it was a neighbor, a package mix-up. But when David opened it and lifted the velvet box from inside, I felt it. Something was off. My stomach clenched. No logic, just instinct. "Your parents sent me something," he said. I barely glanced. A watch. That's when my body moved before my brain. "Don't touch it," I said. Not because I thought it would explode, because I knew it was a test. He looked at me like I'd lost it. "What are you talking about?" I grabbed a tea towel and wrapped the box. Even through the fabric, it felt heavy. Wrong. We sat in silence. I took a photo, not for memories, for evidence. Then I searched. Brand, model, serial, listings. When I showed him this price, $3, $800, he leaned back, crossed his arms. "Maybe they really love me," he joked. Neither of us laughed. My parents don't send gifts like that. They send coupons. My brother had only just moved out, barely affording a down payment with help he never explained. And my parents, they live off frozen vegetables and missed heating bills. I've been quietly covering their utility payments for years, because that's what you do. Right? So where the hell did the money for a $3, $800 Rolex come from? See, 6 months earlier, things were different. David and I had just expanded the nonprofit. Second location, then a third. Still modest, still underfunded. But it was growing. And my parents, they were nearing retirement. No savings. So we gave them part-time jobs, outreach, admin, easy, purposeful work. It felt like a win-win. Like maybe we were building something good. Together. But then my brother Brian suddenly bought a condo. Outright. He said he'd launched a startup. Tech, IP consulting, NDAs, patents. Big things coming. I didn't push. I should have. Around the same time, Dad brought us a new food supplier. He said it was local, cheaper, healthier. The numbers checked out. We trusted him. We signed the contract. And that was our first mistake, because a few months later, people got sick, really sick. And by the time we realized what had happened, the watch was already on the table. They thought they could shut us up with velvet and gold. But I was done being the quiet one. We didn't open the box that night. It stayed on the counter still wrapped in the tea towel I grabbed from the oven handle. We went through the motions, brushing teeth, folding laundry, setting the coffee pot for the next morning, but we weren't really doing any of it. We were thinking the same thought, over and over. Something wasn't right, and deep down, I knew where this was heading. When David and I first started Hearth and Hands, we had nothing. No funding, no big donors, just 2 folding tables in the basement of a church and a few pots of soup. We handed out hot meals to anyone who needed one. Didn't matter who they were. Didn't matter why they'd ended up on the street. He did most of the cooking. I did the paperwork, then the budgeting, then the grant writing. Eventually, I left my job. I joined him full-time. We lived small second-hand furniture, discount groceries. 1 car between us, but it was worth it. Because what we were building felt real. And then, it grew. People noticed. Local news did a segment. Volunteers started showing up. Donors, too. The kind that asked no questions. Just said, keep going. So, we opened a second kitchen across town, then a third. It was still humble, still held together by duct tape and donated cookware, but it was working. That's when my parents stepped in. Or rather, when we invited them in. They were both approaching retirement. No savings, not much of a pension. Their house was falling apart. The boiler had broken last winter. I'd paid for the repairs. Quietly. Like always. They didn't ask for help, but they didn't turn it down either. So we brought them on at the nonprofit. My mom helped with outreach, sending emails, organizing drives. My dad handled basic admin, mostly spreadsheets. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave them something to do, something that mattered. I thought it was the right thing, and for a while, it felt like it. We were working together. We were healing, in our own awkward, Midwestern way. Then Brian moved out. That was the first red flag I ignored. He'd been living in the basement since his second dropout from community college, always chasing some big idea. An app for freelancers, a subscription service for houseplants, a podcast that never launched. Then suddenly, he had a downtown condo. He said he'd started a tech firm, something to do with IP licensing. He couldn't say more NDAs, he claimed. I asked a few basic questions. He changed the subject. And I let him. But now, looking back, I can see exactly where things went sideways. It was that new supplier. My dad showed up one afternoon, folder in hand, face full of pride. I did some research. He said, found a new food vendor. Local, affordable, healthy. David and I were cautious, but the numbers looked fine, the samples were decent, the price was good, and we trusted him. So we signed the contract. 3 months later, the complaints began. At first, it was subtle. The food tastes different. Then came stomach issues. Then vomiting. One man ended up in the ER, dehydrated. He'd eaten nothing else for 2 days. David flipped. He launched a full audit. Invoices, supplier documents, ingredient breakdowns, shelf dates. What he found made him physically sick. Expired canned goods, cheap meat labeled as organic, no nutritional information, unlabeled produce. And they were charging us like it was gourmet. When he confronted my parents, they pushed back hard. It's a misunderstanding. My mom said, people exaggerate. My dad argued. They said backing out of the deal would damage relationships, that it would look bad. That's when I felt the shift. They weren't just defending the supplier. They were defending something else, something deeper, darker. And then, just as David prepared to terminate the contract, the box arrived. Black velvet. Too heavy. Too smooth. No card. No note. Just a silent message. Don't look too close. Don't ask questions. Take the gift and move on. But that wasn't going to happen. Because I was already digging, and I was about to uncover something that would tear us all apart. The next morning was quiet. Not peaceful, tense quiet. David made coffee. I burned the toast. Not on purpose. But I didn't make another batch, either. The watch was still wrapped in the tea towel on the counter. Untouched. Waiting. I stared at it like it might move. David didn't ask what I planned to do. He already knew. I wrote 2 letters. One for my mother, one for my father. Short, formal, precise. Immediate termination, 1 month's pay. No further involvement. We drove in silence. Not angry, just bracing. That kind of silence before a storm. When we got to the office, they were already there. My mom stared blankly at her screen. My dad pretended to work on a spreadsheet, but he was scrolling his phone. Neither of them looked up. We walked right past reception, straight to the staff room. Neutral ground. No clients, no volunteers, no witnesses. David placed the box on the table. I handed them the letters. My father squinted at the envelope. "What is this? Open it," I said. He did. So did she. Their eyes scanned the page. My mom's hand shook. "You're firing us," she whispered. "Yes," I said, "exactly that." My dad stood up fast, chair scraping loudly against the floor. "We're your family. Not anymore," I answered. He looked stunned, like I'd spoken another language, like I had ruined some unspoken agreement. "We didn't do anything wrong," he said. I pulled out my phone, opened the listing, turned the screen toward them. "You want to explain where this came from?" "The watch. Same model. $3,800. Black dial. Luxury box." They didn't respond. "You couldn't afford to fix your boiler last winter." I reminded them. "I paid that bill, remember." Still nothing. "So again, where did the money come from?" My dad shrugged. "It was a gift. An incredibly expensive one," I said. "He deserved something nice," my mom added. "Is generosity a crime now?" "No," I said, "but it's suspicious." That's when they cracked. They started talking at once, flustered, defensive, spinning stories. "You don't understand how hard it's been. The supplier was legitimate. We were trying to help Brian." I froze. "What does Brian have to do with this?" My dad went silent. My mom looked away. "Why were you pushing that vendor so hard? Why lie about the complaints people got sick?" "They were exaggerating," my dad muttered. "One ended up in the ER. Nothing, no apology, no remorse. You had something to gain from that contract, didn't you?" That's when my mother lost her temper. "We didn't do anything illegal," she snapped. "We just made a smart deal. You're the one making it ugly." I leaned in. "So that's where the watch came from." They didn't deny it. And that silence said everything. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just felt this slow burn in my chest. Not rage, just confirmation. They knew exactly what they were doing. They gave David that watch, knowing what it looked like, knowing how it could damage him, damage the nonprofit. "You put him in danger," I said. "You put our work at risk." "For what?" My dad finally snapped. "Do you want to be poor your whole life?" he said. "You want to scrape by while people like that catering company make real money?" I stared at him. People got sick. No one died. That silence again, but heavier now. Then he said it. "You care more about appearances than your own family." I nodded, not because I agreed, because I understood. "No," I said, "I care about right and wrong, and what you did was wrong, all of it." They didn't argue after that. They left, quietly, slowly, like they knew a line had been crossed. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the daughter in the room. I felt like the grown-up. But it wasn't over. Because that afternoon, someone pounded on our front door. Not knocked. Pounded. I opened it, and there he was. "Brian." Face flushed, out of breath, eyes wild. And the first thing out of his mouth wasn't hi. It was, "What did you do?" The way Brian slammed through our front door, you'd think he was being chased. His face was bright red, like he'd sprinted here. But I knew better. That was panic, not cardio. "What did you do?" he snapped. No greeting, No explanation. Just fury. David stepped forward, calm, quiet. Why don't you tell us what this is about? Brian rolled his eyes, frantic. You know exactly what this is about. You canceled the contract. His voice cracked on that last word, like it wasn't just a deal, like it was a lifeline. I stared at him. You're here about the food vendor, he scoffed. You were supposed to stay quiet. Just let it run. My stomach dropped. Let what run? He hesitated, just for a second. But that pause was everything. Now the deal's off, he said, and people want their money back. What people, I asked? Silence. What people? Brian. He didn't name them. He didn't have to. They paid up front, he admitted. The contract's dead. And we didn't deliver. They want their money, all of it. And they're not the kind of people who send polite emails. The room felt suddenly smaller. Let me get this straight. He took money, before the vendor was even approved, before we signed anything, before anyone got sick. He banked on it going through, and now, with the contract terminated, he owed people who don't forgive late payments. I was stunned, but I wasn't surprised. That's what hurt the most. You took money to push a poisoned deal through our non-profit, I asked. Cold. He folded his arms, defensive. I didn't know the food was bad. Of course you didn't, I said, because you never ask questions when money's involved. David stepped forward. You put the entire operation at risk, he said. The people we serve, our staff, volunteers. Brian's voice cracked again. I might have to sell my apartment. That's when I lost it. Then maybe you shouldn't have bought it with money that wasn't yours. I was helping the family, he shouted. No, David said, sharper now. You were helping yourself. Then came the line I'll never forget. Brian's voice dropped. Not angry now, just hollow. If you bring the supplier back, this can still be fixed. I blinked. You're serious? Think about what happens if you don't. There it was. Not a suggestion, not a plea, a threat. David stared at him. Was that a threat? It was a fact. He turned and walked out. We didn't slam the door behind him, but we wanted to. 3 days later, the attack started. First, it was whispers. Old Facebook groups, anonymous accounts, one post here, one comment there. Then it escalated. Did you know the manager drives a car worth more than your donations? Ask them where the Rolex came from. You think they're feeding the homeless? They're feeding their own pockets. A blurry photo of the watch made it online. Then came tagged posts, hashtags, emails to donors. By the end of the week, 2 sponsors paused their donations. One event was canceled without explanation. The staff was rattled. Our volunteer coordinator cried in the kitchen. David looked like he hadn't slept in days. I stared at the bulletin board in the office, as if it held answers. That's when my phone rang. The caller ID said Washington State Dept of Charitable Oversight. I didn't even know that agency existed until that moment. They wanted to schedule a review. Anonymous complaints, the woman said, her tone overly polite. Concerns about leadership, mismanagement, influence. I hung up, walked into the hallway, and looked at David. He didn't ask. He knew. The next morning, we got an email. Short, no signature. No subject line. If the supplier is reinstated and our positions restored, the attacks will stop. That was it. No attempt to hide the blackmail. No subtlety. I read it 3 times, then a 4th. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was pathetic. David sat beside me. We should report it, he said. I nodded. Tomorrow. We didn't sleep much that night. We were crossing a line, not into battle, into war. The next morning, we didn't speak much. We got dressed like we were headed to church. Quiet, serious, intentional. But instead of prayer books, we carried folders, printouts, screenshots, copies of receipts, photos of the watch, emails from the supplier, testimonies from volunteers, Names, dates, everything. We were done playing nice. When we arrived at the precinct, it was almost too quiet. A woman at the front desk asked if we were there to file a report. Fraud, I said. Non-profit corruption, possibly blackmail. She blinked, then led us to a back office. An officer in her 40s sat behind the desk, calm, focused. She asked us to start from the beginning. So we did. I told her about the vendor, about the complaints, the ER visit, the expired food. I told her about my parents, about how they insisted the supplier stay, about the watch. David took over from there. He walked her through the audit, showed the price discrepancies, outlined how the contract had been signed under false pretenses. We explained the conflict of interest, the money, the apartment, the threats. Then I showed her the email, the one that said everything. If the supplier is reinstated and our positions restored, the attacks will stop. She read it, twice, then looked up. "You're not the first," she said, "but you're one of the few with everything documented." She didn't promise a conviction. She didn't make false assurances. But she listened, and that felt like a beginning. As we stepped out of the precinct, I felt the air shift, like the weight wasn't gone but lighter. Like we weren't just victims anymore. We were witnesses, whistleblowers, people who took a stand. And in this country, that means something. Still, we didn't expect what came next. 6 months passed. Quiet at first. We kept our heads down, focused on the kitchens, slowly rebuilt donor trust. But then, it hit the headlines. Front page of the Seattle Ledger, 2-page spread in Northwest Civic, a feature on the morning public radio show. The headline, "Charity Scandal Unfolds, Family Bribery, Spoiled Food, and a Rolex that Broke the Silence." I didn't need to read the whole thing. I knew what it said. It was all true. My parents were arrested first. Charges conspiracy, fraud, bribery. Sentenced to 18 months in federal prison. Fined $50,000. Most of their savings gone. Reputation wiped. They were the couple who meant well. Until they didn't. The ones who quietly cashed in. Even if it meant someone else got hurt. My brother got probation. 200 hours of community service. At a food bank, no less. His apartment was seized. The tech startup dissolved overnight. Turns out, it was just a shell, a tool to route vendor kickbacks and fake invoices. The supplier cascade provisions was exposed. The owner tried to run damage control. Didn't work. License revoked. 1 year in prison, a fine that made the news ticker crawl. Their website disappeared within days. And in non-profit circles, their name became a warning. As for us, we were cleared. Officially. Publicly. The regulator issued a statement. No wrongdoing found by leadership. Victims of internal deception. Donors returned. Volunteers came back. Our board unanimously reaffirmed David's position as executive director. That week, there was fresh coffee in the kitchen. Someone brought homemade muffins. Someone else left a thank you card on my desk. And for the first time in a month, I heard laughter in the hallways. Not nervous, not polite. Real laughter. Because we hadn't just survived the storm. We'd walked through it, together. But something in me had changed. Before this, I thought integrity meant quietly doing the right thing. Now I knew sometimes doing the right thing means dragging it into the light. Even if it burns. Even if it costs you blood, they sent a letter. Not my brother. Not the supplier. My parents. It came in a plain white envelope. No return address. Just our last names scribbled on the front in my mom's handwriting. David found it first. Set it on the table like it might still be dangerous. I stared at it for a long time. Didn't open it. Still haven't. Not because I'm angry, but because it's over. That chapter is closed, and I don't owe it a reread. After everything hit the news, People stopped making small talk at the post office. I'd walk in for stamps, and the clerk would glance down fast, suddenly interested in the register buttons. No more polite smiles from the neighbors. No more "how's the family" in line at the grocery store. Their names were in the paper. So was mine. Only the headline didn't say "Daughter Saves Charity." It said "Daughter Turns in Family." They weren't wrong, but they didn't understand. Because this wasn't revenge. It was protection. At the shelter, I started showing up early. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. The kitchen was loud again, messy again. Volunteers swapped stories over pots of soup. Someone spilled lentils across the floor and laughed so hard they cried. It felt alive. It felt like ours again. I thought I'd wake up at 3 a.m. Thought I'd hear my mom's voice in my head. How could you? After everything we did for you. But I didn't. I slept. Better than I had in years. Because when you know deep in your bones that you did the right thing, even if it cost you everything, there's clarity in that. The guilt didn't stick. Because guilt is what you feel when you know you've failed someone. I didn't fail them. They failed themselves. And me. Sometimes I wonder if they still don't see it, if they think I betrayed them. But the truth is they handed me the matches and stood in a house soaked with gasoline. All I did was say, "No more." One morning, I walked into the kitchen and heard the radio playing something upbeat and ridiculous. A volunteer named Tasha was singing along, off-key. Someone else was showing a new guy how to chop onions without crying. The bread was fresh. The air smelled like garlic and butter, and someone had spilled soup again. And in the middle of all that mess, I felt it. Peace. Not joy, not relief. Something deeper. Like a wound that stopped bleeding. David stood beside me, coffee in hand, smiling quietly like he could feel it too. We didn't say much. We didn't have to. Because this wasn't just about surviving scandal. It wasn't about the press, or the courts, or even the watch. It was about the people who kept showing up. Hungry, hopeful, human. It was about the volunteers who gave up their weekends. The donors who believed in second chances. And it was about us. Two people who chose the hard road. Who said, "This matters," and meant it. 6 months ago, I would have told you I was the kind of person who keeps the peace. The one who avoids conflict. The one who says yes, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. Because that's what I was raised to do. To keep it quiet. To carry the weight. To clean up the mess. Even if I didn't make it. And for a long time, I thought that was love. But it wasn't. It was silence disguised as duty. I used to think protecting the people you love meant defending them, no matter what. But now I think protecting them sometimes means telling the truth, even when they won't listen, even when it costs you everything. Sometimes, protecting others means walking away from the ones who won't change, so that you can protect those who still have a chance. The people who show up hungry, the ones who line up before dawn, just hoping for a hot meal and someone to look them in the eye. They're why I did it. And if I had to do it again, I would, without hesitation. People still ask me if I regret it. Losing my family, turning them in, choosing the shelter over silence. Here's the truth. I don't. Not because it was easy, but because it was right. And in a world where doing the right thing doesn't always come with applause, sometimes peace is your only reward. And let me tell you something. Peace is enough. I haven't spoken to my parents since the sentencing. They sent a second letter, still unopened. It's not that I'm punishing them. It's that I'm done carrying the weight of their choices. We each live with our own, that's enough. And Brian, I haven't heard from him either. His apartment was sold. His community hours logged. He vanished from the startup scene. I heard he tried rebranding New City, new name, new hustle. But people like him, they don't change until the mirror breaks wide open. I just hope someday he looks in and finally sees the truth. The real one. not the version he tells himself. As for me, I show up. I chop onions with new volunteers. I smile at the people in line. I check our balance sheet twice. I sleep through the night. And when I walk into the kitchen each morning smelling garlic, hearing laughter, seeing the mess of it all, I remember. This was never about them. It was always about the people who needed us, the ones who never had a seat at the table, the ones who still matter. Long after the headlines fade. So now I ask you, did it go too far or did it not go far enough? Tell me in the comments. And if this story meant something to you, even a little like, subscribe, share it. Because someone out there might be standing at their own crossroads right now. And maybe they just need to hear this. You're not wrong for choosing truth. You're not selfish for protecting what matters. And you are not alone. Thanks for being here. I'll see you in the next one. And until then, stay loud, stay kind, and stay true.